I'm always actually really happy to have an opportunity to speak up on the teachings of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. I personally, even though I don't quote him that much in my public lectures, the truth is, I would say at least 98% of all my inspiration has come from Breslov since I'm a teenager. And Chaim Kramer, Rabbi Kramer, he won't let me call him Rabbi, but in public over here I can. But Rabbi Chaim Kramer, he's my Rebbe for 42 years. We speak 2, 3, 4 times a week, whatever. And I've been to Uman a few times. This Bezrat Hashem in 2 weeks will be my, I think, 36th trip. Three times under communist Russia. I took all my kids there before the age of 7. And since it opened up in 1990, I think it is, it was 1991, I forget when the Berlin Wall fell and communism fell, so I've been there each Rosh Hashanah, Baruch Hashem. So I'm excited to be able to speak about something that's really very close and meaningful to me. So, Rebbe Nachman on ka'as, on anger. So I actually thought the best place for me to start is I'm just going to give you a few quotes from what he says on the subject, and then we're going to expand on it. One of them is, and this is taken from Likutei Eitzos. Likutei Eitzos, some of you will know that Likutei Maran, his major work, Rav Nosson, his main student, under the guidance of Rav Nachman, wrote a few Sfarim. One of them was to turn all the Torahs of the entire Likutei Maran into tefillahs. Rav Nachman himself said that the highest level of learning is to turn it into a tefillah. The simple logic behind that is that when I learn something and now I want to apply it in my life, I can have the desire to do so, and I can make every effort and employ every strategy to do that, whatever it is. We're talking about anger, to break my anger, but ultimately, can I do anything on my own? Can I succeed in anything? So ultimately, the fact that one would take something that one wants to do, or has just learned, and say, oh, that's inspiring, I'm going to do that. The first thing I need to really ask myself is, is there anyone I need to ask for help over here? So he actually requested of Rav Nosson that he should write a tefillah from every Torah. So that tefillah is actually a request to fulfill all the various practical implications of that particular Torah. So that was one of the Sfarim he was asked to write. Another one was Likutei Eitzos, which was to go through all the entire, slightly over 400 lessons, and then put them into an alphabetical order of just the practical application, like one-liners, without all the mechanics behind why it's so. If you want that, then you go back to the Likutei Maran itself, which is a much larger digest of information that will explain the mechanics behind what he's describing. So that's what I'm quoting from right now, Likutei Eitzos. The other book I mentioned is called Likutei Tefillahs. Likut means a collection. I think that's the actual origin of the English word collect. Likut is the same 3 main letters. It's very often that way in Lashon HaKodesh. Sarach l'shabeh et hakas b'rachmanut. A person should break their anger with rachmanut. So that's a one-liner, with mercy. But in the fuller text, it's talking about how anger, and these are my own words, but this is basically the message. Anger is never real. It's a real problem. See, anger is never real. It may look real, but because it really isn't, if I want to turn it into reality, I've got to take my anger and break it. How do I break it? By being compassionate about the person or the situation I'm in that I'm angry about. So I'm just giving you right now the headline. We're going to go into the mechanics to try and figure out what. So why is my being angry not realistic? What's not realistic about it? We're going to look at that. A person should be toifes b'machshavasa. He should be grasped in his thought et hatachlis. The purpose shashua elam haba. The purpose of this world is the enjoyment of the next world. That's something I should try and pay attention to more and more in my daily life, that I'm not here for this world, I'm really here for a different dimension. And that's part of me breaking my ka'as, my anger. Ka'as v'achzariot hu mechesron hadas. This is like a real biggie. Anger, or when I would act cruelly or be really unjustified in my response to a situation, is actually mechesron hada'at. It's actually from a lack of da'at. Da'at you can translate as knowledge, and really, da'at really does mean a type of knowledge. It's a type of knowledge where our sages tell us, and you'll find this in the Gemara Nadarim Mem Aleph, where the Gemara tells us, im da'at kanita, if you have da'at, we'll look at that in just a few moments, what is that knowledge it's referring to? Ma chasata, what are you missing? V'im da'at chasata, but if I'm missing this da'at, this mind or knowledge, which we'll see in a few moments what it's referring to, ma kanita, if I don't have da'at, what have I ever acquired? So Rashi there explains that when a person has da'at, there's nothing he's missing in his life. There's nothing. He literally has everything. So that means to say, a person could have wealth and health, and happy marriage and wonderful children, but if there's something missing here, my own da'at, which we're going to look at very, very quickly, very soon, then I can't enjoy my marriage, I can't enjoy my wealth, I can't enjoy my health, I can't enjoy this world. So we need to look at what does that mean, that my anger is a result of me missing out on this da'at. Is this, is it making sense of, I haven't gone into that yet, we're going to see what it really is, because it's a term that Chazal use all the time, our sages refer to this frequently. When a person comes to whatever anger they find themselves in, hu mitgabe al yitzro, needs to overcome it, that yitzra, umarich apai, and be patient, v'koivesh kasai, conquer the anger, al yedezeh zocher lashiyut, through that he will come to wealth, al yedezeh magdil shemo v'nafsho v'zocher l'shem tov, and it will end up getting a good name as well. We know that, quick show of hands, how many people are really endeared to those who frequently lose their patience and get angry? How many of us are deeply endeared? We just, I don't know, we find some gravitating to these people. We just enjoy their company, and they just marry them. And then we marry them because we love them so much, and we stay married. So it's in world history, anger has never really been something that anybody says, I love this person because they so frequently get angry, as a means of communicating. It never happened. But we'll look at so why is anger so artificial? Why is it really not real? We'll see in a few moments. Okay. All right, there's more. He says here, through breaking one's kas, it's bringing Mashiach closer, and it says, through him, he's actually giving justification for the creation of the universe. It's a very, very powerful language, but in the Likutei Moharan, where it's elaborated on in much more detail, it becomes much more apparent why there's this connection, that by conquering anger, it's actually contributing to the coming of Mashiach, and justifying that the world should continue because of this one person who is. There's a Gemara which actually was also based on Likutei Moharan is based on a Chazal, that Hashem says that the entire creation is worth my while sustaining for one person who b'shas riv, at the moment of conflict, boilem piv, seals his mouth. Not from weakness, we'll talk about that in a few minutes, I hope we'll get to that as well, but from an inner strength. We'll talk about what that means. So those are some of the statements he says in Likutei Eitzos. Then Sefer Midas, which it's really hard to fathom the greatness of Rebbe Nachman. It's probably impossible till we pass on to the next world. As you know, he died relatively young. He died 38 years old. He made some extraordinary, really extraordinary claims about what he's able to do, both for a person in this world and a person when they pass on. He makes claims that actually, if you look carefully, you will find not completely dissimilar claims throughout our sages. Reb Shimon Bar Yochai once said, and you find this in page 45 in Sukkah, where he said, if I wanted, I could exempt the whole world from negative consequences. No one would have to go to Gehenna. I could do that from the time of creation till now, but if my son would be with me, that's Rabbi Eliezer, Reb Shimon, Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Reb Shimon, Bar Yochai, then I can do it until Mashiach, if I'm not mistaken. But if Yosem, I'm trying to remember the name of a specifically righteous king, he said if he would be with us, and that's a threesome, the combined zechut, the combined merit that we are able to bring together would be enough to be machriya, that means to outweigh all the negativity that God would otherwise have held in escrow against all of mankind from the beginning of creation till Tchias HaMesim, till the resurrection of the dead. So there are statements that have been made throughout Chazal which point to the function of a tzaddik in his lifetime and beyond. This gets into deep water, and this is one of the reasons why mainstream Judaism for 2,000 years shied away from the role of the tzaddik. This is not about caste right now, I'm going to get back to it, but I need to give a little bit of credibility to how far this really goes, so we know what we're talking about, a little bit at least. I'm talking for myself. The power of a tzaddik is not just what they can do in this world, but it's even much more after passing away, because we're stuck in a world that unfortunately we actually refer to as life. And the word chayim, which we translate or mistranslate as life, is actually a plural word, and the word chayim therefore really correctly translates as lives. And you don't have a word in Lashon HaKodesh, in biblical Hebrew, for life. And the reason why is because you can't have something in Hebrew for something that does not exist, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu created the universe with this language. So this language dictated when Hashem created the universe, and continually dictates reality, because Hashem is Mechadesh B'chol Yom Tamid Ma'aseh Bereishis, His Oiseh Bereishis all the time. It's happening now. In which case, these words are what's constantly creating reality. So you can't have a word for life in Lashon HaKodesh if it doesn't exist. Do you understand? There is no word. The word Chai, by the way, is an adjective, means alive. Oid Avinu Chai, our father is still alive. Oid Yosef Chai, Yosef is still alive. But there's no word in biblical Hebrew for life, because there's no such thing as a life. There's Chayim, there are lives, there's this world and there's the world to come. The world to come exists as we live in this world, but this world is like so real. It's so brilliantly camouflaged in such a way that when I experience people hurting me or upsetting me or abusing me or calling me names or putting me down, and now that becomes a memory in my mind which I can pull out of my memory banks, replay it and go through the pain of it again. That is because we're living in a world where it's really olam hafach. Olam hafach means it's inside out, it's outside in. It appears as though everything that we experience is happening to me, when in reality, that's not how it happens. As Rebbe Nachman talks about this a lot, and very recently I came across Sid Banks and his three principal insights, and it was so fascinating that I said, one second, the words he's saying is literally word for word in Rebbe Nachman. So I don't think he actually got it from there, but it just resonated so powerfully, because Rebbe Nachman talks about in Simon Kuf Lamed, Torah called Kuf Lamed Zayin, Kuf Lamed Ches, that every human being is actually made up of Tselem Elokim. God is inside you all the time. Your neshama, which is the power to be able to think, the power to experience this world. That is your neshama, your mind. And many times throughout Chazal, but you'll find this in Rebbe Nachman, he speaks about it a lot. Your neshama is your seichel. Your neshama is your da'as. Da'at. Da'at, I'll quickly touch on now. Da'at is the acceptance that opposites actually coexist. The concept is that God can't do anything wrong. It's impossible. And that's something we'll only really fully appreciate when Mashiach comes. V'yadata hayom, but Hashem still commands me today to know. V'hashavois levavecha, bring into my thoughts. Ki Hashem hu Elokim. He is the power of all powers. That's what Elokim means. Bashamayim mima'al, in the worlds above, in the heavens above, al haaretz, and on the earth beneath. This is a verse in chapter 4 of Deuteronomy, and Hashem is dictating to me how I should look at this world. Know today and bring it into your thoughts that I am the only power in the heavens above and the earth beneath, and the verse should end there, but he doesn't. God then adds, Ein Oid, there's nothing else. So this world has been brilliantly designed to appear real. But it's called, in our sages, who are the mouthpiece of God, Olam HaSheker. It's deceptive, it's a lie. Another very kind description for this world is Olam HaDimyon. It's an illusion. It's a brilliant illusion. It really feels so real. But the only place you and I actually experience it as real is only one place. It's not in your pinky, it's not in your elbow, it's not in your kneecap, and it's not in your stomach. The only place we actually experience reality is in my head, in my mind, in my thoughts. It's impossible to experience it in any other way. And there are many fascinating examples of sometimes very ordinary people and sometimes extraordinary people who had at least a moment of complete total liberation, enlightenment if you want to call it, where they experienced the worst imaginable pain, and yet in that same moment recognizing that the source of the pain is still what I'm experiencing, and if I can say, oh, it's really my mind that counts the most, then guess what? What matters more? The actual source of the pain, what appears in this world, or what I'm thinking? So just to concretize this a little bit, one of my favorite examples is Viktor Frankl. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning, he was in 6 years between Auschwitz and Dachau in 2 camps, and at one point they experimented on him. They removed his masculinity without any anesthetic. And he said it was in that moment that he experienced the greatest liberation. Because he realized in that moment, the Nazis had his body, they could do anything they wanted with it, but they didn't control his thought. His mind still belonged to him, and that for him was incredibly liberating. There are very few people who have gone through incredible pain, but some of us are actually familiar with, I don't know if you've ever played ice hockey or English football, and you get kicked in the shin. Oh, it's really nasty. And you're on the ground, it's the middle of the game, they call out timeout, whatever. Then you continue the game, and when the referee finally blows the whistle, 20 minutes later, you go limping off the pitch. 1 second, Rietti. You got kicked in the shin 20 minutes ago, and now you've been running around ever since then. And now when the whistle blows, now you're limping off the pitch. So no, my mind was not paying attention to the pain. It was paying attention to the game. And there's much more to gain from the game than the pain. And so that's not where my mind was. Oh, but the minute the whistle blows and the game is over, the body says, okay, can you hear me now, please? And I'm limping off the pitch. Oh. So we can experience it in our own lives. Some of you have teenagers. Sorry to remind you, I beg your pardon. So I didn't mean to cause any unnecessary pain. So some of you have teenagers where you're calling them for supper, you're calling them for to get ready for an outing or anything, and say, yeah, Mum. And it goes on and on and on. And then, but I've been calling you. No, you didn't. No, now you listen to, if you could play back the decibels that were registered in the brain, his mind probably does have the activity of the sound waves of Mum, Dad calling them, but the brain shut off. You and I do this all the time. We don't live in reality. We live in our own reality that we create every single moment. So what we're going to look at is, why is Kaas really not real? And it's part of Olam HaSheker. And it will help us understand why Da'at, knowledge, that we're referring to over here, is the knowledge of reality. There's reality thinking, there's non-reality thinking. Reality thinking, emunah.
reality thinking, oh, lo taturu acharei levavchem, don't go after my thoughts. Leiv, we've spoken about many times before, but the vast majority of times throughout the entire Chumash and Nach and Chazal, the word leiv means mind. It's referring to thoughts. Here, hu ha-leiv doesn't mean thoughts of the heart. That's not where you do your thinking. And if you know someone who's had a heart transplant, then you'll know that their mind is still the same as before. Otherwise, oh my gosh, what a mess this would be. Now, we do our thinking up here. Chazal and the Torah use the word leiv because they want us to know that there's no difference. You cannot divorce, well, you can, but you can't divorce the emotion from the mind. It's impossible. Now, what we've done in the Western world is we've segregated the two, and we've actually called them two different capacities. What I feel and what I think. But this is a pure misunderstanding of reality. You can't experience any emotion that's not thought first. It's impossible. For me to experience anger, I have to be thinking anger. For me to experience jealousy, I have to think jealousy. For me to experience a taiva, a desire for something that may be good or not good for me, I actually have to think about it. It's impossible for me to experience an emotion without thinking. I'll give you a very simple example of this. This is one of my favorites. It's taken from Rabbi Noach Weinberg. And I would never share this in public if it weren't that I heard it from him myself. And his audience was a bunch of secular college kids. So you'll understand why he's giving this example. But he said, hey, imagine Joe is saving up money to buy a Porsche. And he's been working years now to be able to put a down payment on this Porsche. And it means everything to him, because if I drive a Porsche, it's my image. It's what I'll attract in my life by driving a Porsche. And he finally makes enough money to put a down payment and secure the leases. And on the first Sunday morning, he takes the Porsche out to the thruway, and he's going to go as fast as he possibly can. And he's up to the last red light. He's revving up, and just before the light changes to green, a car comes behind him and smashes into the back of the car. He doesn't even know what to think. All you know is, can't process. It's just like every expectation in this almost next second has been led to and he can't gather his thoughts before the car pulls away and smashes a second